Dorothy felt uneasy when a new pastor joined her church. No matter how hard she tried to ignore it, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She wasn't the only one who felt this way. Other longtime members of the church had also noticed some troubling changes. The pastor's recent request for donations made several loyal churchgoers suspicious, adding to their growing concerns. Dorothy Carson, a 73-year-old from Queens, was the picture of dedication. Since she was a child, she had never missed a Sunday service at the same church where her parents had her baptized. Her years of commitment had earned her a well-respected place in the congregation, giving her special privileges and a key role in managing church affairs. When the news came that their beloved Pastor Glenn was retiring after 15 years, it shocked the whole community, especially Dorothy. Though upset at first, Pastor Glenn's comforting words about trusting in God to find a new leader reassured her. Just as he had said, a young and eager candidate soon appeared. Despite some doubt about the pastor's youth, Dorothy agreed to meet with him for an interview. The meet-and-greet event that followed surprised her. Her nervousness dissipated upon encountering the vibrant 34-year-old Pastor Williams. His youthful energy and apparent devotion impressed Dorothy, though she harbored quiet concerns about his ability to lead such an established congregation. To Dorothy's relief, Pastor Williams quickly won over the other church elders with his charisma and engaging personality. The congregation welcomed him warmly, and Dorothy eagerly anticipated his first sermon. Initially, everything seemed perfect. Pastor Williams' inaugural sermon moved Dorothy to tears, confirming in her mind that they had made the right choice. However, as weeks passed, subtle changes began to surface. Dorothy noticed a shift in the new pastor's focus during his sermons. While still rooted in Scripture, his messages started to incorporate elements that gave her pause. What had seemed like a promising new chapter for the church was beginning to reveal unexpected complexities. Dorothy found herself grappling with these changes, unsure of what they might mean for the future of the congregation she had called home for so long. Our church is beloved by God, and we must care for one another and our place of worship, Pastor Williams declared from the pulpit. I've observed that our beautiful house of God needs some work. Let's come together and contribute to its restoration, he urged, his voice filled with conviction. Dorothy listened, perplexed. While she acknowledged the church could use minor repairs, a complete overhaul seemed unnecessary. After the service, she sought out Pastor Williams in his office to voice her concerns. Pastor, I'm not sure extensive renovations are needed, Dorothy began cautiously. Pastor Williams responded swiftly, his tone patronizing. Sister Dorothy, my male perspective allows me to see the church's age and where improvements are necessary. With winter approaching, we can't risk our congregation being cold and wet. They deserve the best, and we'll ensure they get their money's worth. His dismissive attitude and gender-based reasoning struck a nerve with Dorothy. Her lengthy association with the church gave her intimate knowledge of the building, far surpassing his recent acquaintance. Despite her misgivings, she chose to remain humble and give him the benefit of the doubt, prioritizing the church's well-being. As months passed, Pastor Williams' popularity soared. The congregation grew, particularly among younger demographics, a long-time struggle for the church. Dorothy felt a mix of pride and unease, seeing the pews consistently full each Sunday. The church seemed to flourish under Pastor Williams' charismatic leadership. Both longtime members and newcomers were drawn to his dynamic sermons and engaging personality. Dorothy couldn't deny the renewed vitality, yet her internal disquiet persisted. Driven by her concerns, Dorothy found herself meticulously inspecting the church property. Her careful examination revealed nothing to justify the pastor's claims about necessary renovations. Recalling the previous winter, she remembered the building had weathered the season just fine. A troubling question nagged at her. Why was this new pastor so insistent on collecting donations for seemingly unnecessary work? An ominous feeling settled in Dorothy's gut, fueling her growing suspicions about Pastor Williams' true intentions. Dorothy meandered through the church's main hall, her arms clasped behind her back. Believing herself alone, she scrutinized the ceiling, searching for any signs of damage. What had Pastor Williams seen that eluded her? Her initial fondness for the new pastor had given way to doubt. Though Dorothy typically saw the best in people, especially church leaders, something about this man felt off. His unilateral decision about renovations, without consulting other members, struck her as unusual. Unlike previous pastors, he seemed fixated on soliciting donations from the congregation. Lost in thought, Dorothy was startled by a sudden noise. She turned to find Pastor Williams in the doorway, observing her inspection. I didn't expect to see you here, she said, her voice betraying her nervousness. Sister Dorothy, what brings you to my church on a Saturday afternoon? He asked, his tone bordering on arrogance. His words grated on her. This wasn't his church, it belonged to the community. Choosing honesty, she replied. I came to see what renovations the church needs. I don't see any problems, Pastor. He rolled his eyes. Of course you don't. His dismissive attitude shocked her. It's because the problems are on the outside. You should see what the roof looks like from above. One snowstorm and the entire roof will cave in. Skeptical, Dorothy pressed him. Have you been up there yourself? Why, yes, I have. Have you? He retorted, raising an eyebrow. His disrespect was palpable. Gone was the charm he displayed in public, replaced by condescension toward the woman who had championed his hiring. "Now, Dorothy, I must ask you to leave. We have builders coming for a quote. I'll see you in church tomorrow morning. Goodbye," he said curtly before walking away. Stunned into silence, Dorothy left the church, her anger mounting. She decided to wait in her car, watching. In the half hour that followed, no builders arrived, but she noticed some of the pastor's younger friends entering the church. As she drove home, her fury intensified. The young pastor's behavior and apparent deception weighed heavily on her mind. She worried about the financial burden his renovations might place on the struggling members of their community. That night, Dorothy's concerns plagued her thoughts and even infiltrated her dreams. The confrontation had left her more upset than she'd been in years. Her trust in the new pastor was thoroughly shaken. Sunday morning arrived, and Dorothy reluctantly prepared for church, her usual enthusiasm dampened by recent events. As she settled into her familiar pew, surrounded by concerned friends who sensed her unease, Pastor Williams took the stage. The service began with praise and worship, momentarily lifting Dorothy's spirits. However, as Pastor Williams began his sermon, her apprehension returned. "My friends," he began solemnly, "I bear heavy news. My beloved grandmother has fallen gravely ill." His eyes, brimming with apparent sorrow, scanned the congregation. "Though not a member of our church, she is dear to me. Last night, God spoke to me in a dream, urging me to seek your help. I've set up a GoFundMe to raise $60,000 for her medical expenses. You'll find the link in your emails." Dorothy's heart sank. Another plea for money. Another story that rang false to her ears. As weeks passed, every sermon seemed to include a new fundraising appeal, placing mounting pressure on the congregation. The church's unity began to fracture. Some supported the constant calls for donations, while others questioned their necessity. Friendships strained, and attendance dwindled as people felt overwhelmed by the financial demands. Determined to uncover the truth, Dorothy began investigating the church's financial records. What she discovered shocked her to her core. Large sums had been withdrawn from the renovation fund, with no evidence of any actual improvements to the church. The painful truth dawned on her. Pastor Williams and his inner circle had been embezzling funds for their personal gain. Guilt washed over her. She had championed his hiring, falling for his charismatic facade. Armed with evidence, Dorothy confronted Pastor Williams. Initially, he denied any wrongdoing, but faced with irrefutable proof, he crumbled. He confessed to diverting funds to finance a lavish lifestyle, all while preaching about sacrificial giving. As the full extent of the betrayal became clear, Dorothy grappled with the impact on her faith community. The path to rebuilding trust and healing the wounds inflicted by this deception would be long and challenging. Dorothy's voice trembled with emotion as she confronted Pastor Williams. "How could you betray us like this? We welcomed you with open arms. I pray you've sought forgiveness, for God is watching." Determined to right the wrong, Dorothy called an emergency meeting with the church elders. She presented the damning evidence, leaving the congregation stunned by the depth of the betrayal. After careful deliberation, they made the difficult decision to remove Pastor Williams and report the financial misconduct to the authorities. In the wake of the scandal, the church entered a period of healing and rebuilding. The painful experience served as a powerful lesson about the importance of vigilance and transparency in matters of faith and finance. Despite her initial doubts, Dorothy played a crucial role in exposing the wrongdoing. She continued to serve as an elder, recommitting herself to the values that had drawn her to the church initially. Her fellow elders convinced her to stay when she considered stepping down, recognizing her integral role in the church's recovery. Gradually, the congregation began to heal. New leadership was installed, committed to transparency and genuine spiritual growth. The focus shifted back to faith, compassion, and community outreach. The church slowly regained trust, even attracting new members inspired by its resilience. Dorothy's actions earned her great respect in the community. She became a symbol of strong faith and integrity. As she grew older and her health declined, she found comfort knowing the church was back on the right track. In her final act of devotion, Dorothy donated a large part of her savings to fund a real renovation of the church. This would be a lasting symbol of the power of faith and honesty. When the construction started, the congregation came together to see their church's transformation. It was a visible sign of their spiritual renewal. People of all ages stood side by side, their faces filled with hope for the future and gratitude for the wisdom that had carried them through tough times. Dorothy's legacy would live on, not just in the rebuilt church, but in the hearts of everyone who had learned from her courage, perseverance, and unshakable faith in difficult moments.